For 27 years, he has visited and been in love with Hanoi. He has not only studied Vietnam through data and reports, but also through walks along memory-filled streets and by listening to the stories of Hanoians. He has captured the city's poetic spirit in his books. A former World Bank economist who worked in Vietnam, Martin Rama from Uruguay has explored and contributed to Hanoi in his own unique way.
Hanoi, a city that speaks softly yet never stops surprising those who listen closely. Among those who have listened with both intellect and heart is Martin Rama, an economist, author, and photographer who spent over 2 decades studying Vietnam's transformation and fell deeply in love with its capital city. And today on Talk Vietnam, we'll explore that love story, one between a man and a city. And so thank you so much, Martin, for coming over to Talk Vietnam.
Thank you, Dylan. Very happy to be here.
All right. And so our first question is, you came to Hanoi, and I'm sure it's going to be on a mission because you arrived as the lead economist for the World Bank. And do you remember when you first arrived? What were your initial reactions to Hanoi? What is like your first impressions?
Of course, I do remember because it was a very strong first impression. The year was 1998. I had been working for several years at the World Bank as an economist. That's my background, my profession. And I was supporting work of the World Bank in several countries. And at some point, this opportunity arose to come and do some work in Vietnam. I said yes. But I had priors, of course, of a country ravaged by war, devastation, suffering, emerging from a very difficult economic period. And then I came, and it was a shock. I came in October, the most beautiful month of Hanoi. And I found a city that, of course, was poor, but it was beautiful. A city with elegance, with good food, with people who were so kind and so constructive, so eager to progress.
I was born in 1997, so so I was 1 year. I was 1 years old when you first arrived, and I remember like when I was growing up in Vietnam, in Hanoi more specifically, it never felt like a city that's lacking anything. It always felt like there's a certain warmth and friendliness, and like you said, elegance and point of charms to it. And that is one of the reasons why I've always defended Hanoi.
Sure, and there was this refinement in the food, in the paintings, ceramics. There was this beauty in the architecture, the French villas, even in the rundown and with everything, the tree-lined streets,
And so when is the turning point for you where you decided that, I'm going to stay here a long time, I'm going to make this my home?
I had been working for more than 3 years in Vietnam, coming maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. I was pleased with the progress. There are other developing countries in which you may work very hard, but you don't see the difference. Here, we had a very good collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, and it was at the time for the program of reforming the state-owned enterprises. And then there was a job as the lead economist for the program here, which was a big job for the World Bank because Vietnam is an important country, and at that time it was one of the most important countries in terms of lending for the World Bank. So I thought, maybe I will not get the job, but I will go for it, and it worked. And so in 2002, I moved to Hanoi.
In your early days in Hanoi, what does your one day of working looks like as you become like the lead economist of Vietnam at that time?
It was intense in terms of work. Because a lot was happening in Vietnam. Over the 8 years I lived here, we managed to have a very constructive relationship with the government of Vietnam and to support Vietnam through very important reforms. These were the years when Vietnam acceded to the World Trade Organization, when it reformed its banking system, when it created its first social insurance law. So there was a lot going on. So my days were very intense and very full and very long. But I was lucky. By then, the World Bank had moved to a building that is one of the best locations in Hanoi, just across from the Opera House.
Wow.
And my window was overlooking the Opera House. And so I will go out for breaks, for lunch or for a drink. I will go to the terrace of the building. So even if I was working insanely, I must say, there were constant breaks that were bringing me to Hanoi. And just the lights of the Opera House going on in the evening, it was like a show in front of me. Wow. And then the other thing is I decided that I wanted to live in the core of Hanoi. Many expatriates preferred to live in the Tai Ho area because services were better and all that.
Sure.
I liked the charm of central Hanoi, so I decided that I wanted to live there.
Yeah.
And so finding a house, renovating a house, was my other task. So I was very busy with the bank
work
and very busy with these other tasks.
Wow. Prior to this talk, me and Martin had the opportunity to walk around Hanoi and really explore how a city develops. And we take our time in the Pharmacy University to really understand how that city develops through its planning and through its architecture. So here's a look.
Martin Rama brought the Talk Vietnam team to a place that evokes deep emotions about Hanoi's heritage beauty, the Hanoi University of Pharmacy.
So, what is the significance of the architecture of the University of Pharmacy right here?
It's a very special building, one of very few that this man, Ernest Ebrard, did, of what is called the Indochina style.
Wow.
And what is special is that he mixed very good French architecture of the Art Deco period with very Vietnamese architecture. And this building is very special in this blending of architecture from Vietnam and from France. And I think that's what, to me, has a special emotion. So when you look at the building, you will not find buildings like this in Paris.
Right.
Because it has elements in the decoration, in the woodwork, in the patterns that are typical from this region, not from France.
So, speaking of like urban development, right? Hanoi has this blend of this kind of architecture along with newer development areas, but also the planning kind of stayed the same. So, would you say that is representative of like a vision of Hanoi that you think it blends between a harmony of traditions and innovation, but also growth?
Over time, this part of Hanoi will be the most valuable one because it has this very modern layout with wide streets, wide sidewalks, very nice tree alignments.
Yeah.
It uses the lake because the preservation of Hoang Kiem Lake as a center of the city was also part of that thinking. So when you think about the most interesting part of Hanoi, it comes from the urban ideas of
the kind of this very yellow color too.
Yeah, I'm not sure when they decided on the yellow, but by now it's part of the character of the city. You cannot imagine Hanoi without the yellow.
I agree.
Every corner, arch, and window here holds a nostalgic charm. Each time he visits, he spends hours observing and photographing the building. Through this deep appreciation, he has proposed significant ideas for preserving Hanoi's heritage. To him, the Hanoi University of Pharmacy reflects classical beauty, cultural fusion, and historical depth, something to cherish every day.
You obviously love Hanoi a lot, so much so that you even have a lot of books about it. So, in your book, For the Love of Hanoi. So, what inspired you to write it?
So first, before For the Love of Hanoi is a recent book. It came out last year. My first book about Hanoi was Hanoi Promenade. And in fact, it was published after I left Hanoi. But what had happened is that in my being in Hanoi, whenever I will have a break, especially on weekends, I will go out with a camera, not a digital camera, so chemical film, or with a bicycle. I had a bicycle and went around, just trying to understand the city by walking through it, by wandering through it, which is what promenade means. The word comes from French. It's when you walk without any particular destination in mind and you just discover things. So I was doing that. I was taking pictures. I was reading about the city. And then I decided that, in fact, Hanoi was a much better city than even Hanoians seem to realize. That Hanoi is a city that can be at a very high level by global standards as one of the wonderful cities of the world. And that we were living through a period of such rapid change that there was a risk that some of these characteristics that make Hanoi so special could be damaged. It's like you are fast-paced, you need roads, you need warehouses, you need factories, and you may disregard what makes the charm of Hanoi. I thought maybe I should try to share what I see as special about Hanoi. And so I started reassembling, reorganizing my pictures, my readings. And I thought, in fact, Hanoi is like a Vietnamese dish. In fact, it's like a pho. Is you take a lot of ingredients and you mix them, maybe like 24 ingredients, and you get a taste that is very unique. And so I said, let's go through the ingredients, which may be the architecture, which may be the streets, which may be the shops. And so this book, Hanoi Promenade, is like 24 little chapters, each about one topic, with stories, with pictures about it. And it was like, in leaving, I left in 2010, that was the end of my assignment here. It was like leaving a love declaration to the city.
Hanoi Promenade, published in 2014, is Martin Rama's gentle yet profound message about the city. Through his wandering footsteps in narrow lanes and busy streets, he recorded the rustic yet graceful beauty of a Hanoi that is both ancient and full of life. Each chapter reveals an element of the city's identity, its architecture, street rhythms, climate, culture, and cuisine. His own photographs further express his affection for every corner. But alongside this love is the concern that rapid urbanization could erase Hanoi's uniqueness. The book received the Bùi Xuân Phái Award for the love of Hanoi in 2014, serving as a tender reminder that each person can help preserve the beloved city.
I think what surprises a lot of people the most is that, as a chief economist, one would expect you to talk a lot about growth, numbers, GDP, things that can be calculated in numbers. And so what has pushes you to really focus on that particular part of Hanoi instead of just purely numbers?
Well, I still look at all these as an economist. I think that cities are among probably the best thing that mankind has done. When you look at the history of mankind, a lot happens in cities. That's where ideas pop up, where people exchange and with each other, where new firms, new ways of doing things happen. So cities are the greatest creator of value, and economists care about value. And when you think about heritage as an economist, you don't think about particular buildings at all. Some historian would say this building is important because this thing happened in whatever year. You think about the characteristics that give a sense of place to the city, that make Hanoi being different from other cities. A sense of place that was lost in many Southeast Asian cities, as they grew very fast, so a lot disappeared along the way. Those things add value to the city. And by the time you become a relatively rich country, back then Vietnam was still a poor country, but Vietnam has the potential to be really a rich country. What you need in a city is the really talented people. There's the entrepreneurs, the researchers, the artists who create a lot of value, the ones who create opinion, and so on and so forth. These people can choose where to live, and they will never settle for a bland city. So as an economist, you say, if you destroy your heritage now, you will pay a price tomorrow, because you will get a bland city. And so while it was written with the heart, because she is lovely, Hanoi is really lovely, it was also written as an economist. I'm not part of the nostalgic group that just wants to go back to an idyllic Hanoi of the past. That cannot happen. This country needs to develop. Hanoi needs to densify, to become richer, to become modern. But it's how you do it without losing your character.
A lot of people resonates with your idea on how Hanoi should look like and how it should develop over the years, like you said before, a combination of heritage and growth. A lot of those kind of ideas kind of collected and goes into your book, For the Love of Hanoi, right?
Yeah, so that's my second book. In fact, what happened is I wrote the first book, published the first book, launched it with the help again of people in the arts community. So a lot of my friends are artists, and I think often in cities, artists are among the most interesting people you can find, and they create a lot of value. So as an economist, you want a city with this artistic talent. And then I realized that, the book resonated with people. First, it won the Buisan Fire Award, which I was not expecting. That
the Hanoi Promenade, right?
Yeah, Hanoi Promenade. That gave me some visibility. And then people started approaching me about demolitions of buildings that had character, or about events that they were unsettled with. And so I said, okay, maybe I will start writing. I must say that many of the campaigns that are covered in this other book in
For the Love of Hanoi, right?
For the Love of Hanoi, many of these are like 45 articles in the media. Many of the campaigns were successful. When you become a creative city, you need a city with character. The people who are the creatives will not settle for a bland place. Hanoi has a lot of character. Many of the Southeast Asian cities had a lot of character, and they lost it. And so now you have these bland cities of shopping malls and highways that, okay, it's functional, it's practical, but if you want the stimulation that creativity needs, it's not where you want to live. And so there is a very big risk. It's like you have a huge asset and you don't understand its value. And in the case of Hanoi, that asset is oversized because it's a city with 1,000 years of history, with something that is very Vietnamese, which is this ability to absorb influences and blend them and do something else. So it's a Asian city, it's a French city, it has modernist architecture, it has the hutaptes, which I like especially. I know that some people may think I'm crazy, but they are part of the personality of Hanoi. So Hanoi had this huge asset and a big risk of losing it or damaging it. And now, after I came here more than 25 years ago, I'm much more optimistic that things will work out well.
For the Love of Hanoi, published in 2023, is his sincere confession to the city he has fallen for. Through 45 essays, he walks gently through the city's streets and its fading memories. He regards Hanoi with tenderness, but also worry, fearing its fragile beauty may be lost. Therefore, he uses stories and analysis to propose preservation strategies that allow Hanoi to grow without losing its soul. To him, the city is a graceful muse, and the book is a heartfelt message encouraging everyone to love and cherish Hanoi.
Hanoi Promenade was written and documented and photographed during the time when you were leaving Hanoi, right? 2010, like you said, an ode to, the lover.
It was, It was like words of gratitude to a very generous lover. Not always easy. Hanoi is not always easy.
Of course.
You can get irritated with the weather. You can get irritated with the traffic and the noise. But when you put things in perspective, no, she's wonderful.
Yeah. And so this is also the kind of books that also incorporate your role as a photographer as well. So as you stroll around the street of Hanoi, taking photos, and obviously seeing Hanoi has been developed, from when it was like still riding bicycles to now having cars just crowding the streets. How do you see, Hanoi's progress?
Well, it has all of the elements of a big city. You have more congestion, you have more noise. It takes time to go over them. Of course, when you start having a metro system that works and you can start decongesting. Now, I don't live permanently in Hanoi, but I have a home in Hanoi and I keep coming 3-4 times a year, and I always enjoy coming back to Hanoi.
Yeah.
I find that in the end, what moves people is emotion. I'm from Uruguay, from Latin America. I find that the Vietnamese are a bit Latin in the sense that among the Asians, I find that element of emotion and sensitivity is very strong. And I would say some of the articles I got the strongest reactions were emotional articles. And they were deliberately written in an emotional style.
Also contributes to being one of the guardians of Hanoi's heritage, if I might put that a little bit poetically.
I wish I could be remembered as someone who helped Hanoi's research. A lot of people are doing important things, but I think that a sense of purpose in life is very important. You don't mobilize people just to say, oh, this will be more profitable for the city in the long run. You mobilize because people think of the city of their parents, the city they grew up in, they think about their children, they think about the kind of city they want for themselves. That's much more important than the numbers.
And speaking about your photographs, right? One of the subjects that appears the most in your photograph is the Hanoi living quarters, the collective housing units, the kind of space that we're surrounded by today. What is it about these ancient historical blocks of building that fascinates you so much?
Let me take one step back before a tangent, let's say, before I get to the root of this. When I was working on Hanoi Promenade, the first book, what I thought is, everybody understands the French character of Hanoi. Everybody understands the traditional Vietnamese character, the deans, the pagodas, the temple of literature. Everybody understands. But there are other elements of architecture in Hanoi which are less standard. So you have all the architecture of which the Hut Aptes are part of, the modernist style, which, because of history, in the case of Vietnam, of Hanoi, it was the Soviet version of the modernist style, but it was more or less the same ideas in the West. You have Kyo Phap. Kyo Phap is, again, despite its name, is not a French style. It's a completely Vietnamese style. And it became all the rage in the 90s, and so everybody was building. And it sometimes is a bit funny as architecture, but you put it all together and it's part of the character of the city. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is that heritage, what makes the character of a city, is not necessarily the grand buildings, the temples of literature and the opera house. Of course, these landmarks are extremely important, but it's this feeling of the city. Now, going back to Hut Aptes, there were many of them. At some point, 1/4 of the population of Hanoi lived in Hut Aptes. And these were modern buildings at the time, so they were an improvement. And they have many good ideas. When you look at them, one thing I like is they have much better social life than modern apartments. You have these wide staircases and these corridors that are open. You know, you don't go in an inside corridor, you go through balconies from one place to another very often. You have these spaces in between blocks where children play, where you have shops and markets. So they have very good ideas. And at some point I thought, some of these buildings are in the best places in the city. You know, many cities build this kind of modernist house. In Europe, you have all the suburbs of many big cities because they had to accommodate the final rural population moving to the cities, and they have become very bad. It's where nobody wants to live, where you have the highest crime, where you have drug dealers and things like that. Hutaptes are not like that. Hutaptes had the best population because you had the civil servants and the workers in state-owned, but these were educated people, connected people. So you have a very good population socially.
A healthy mixture of...
Very good. It's a middle class, a solid middle class. It's so very diverse.
Exactly.
But very lively. And so as I said, I will get an apartment, not a Western modern apartment. I will get a Hutapte apartment and renovate it and make it almost a proof of concept that one can live wonderfully in a Hutapte. When you look at the staircases of the Hutaptes, they tend to be wide, not like the new apartments. And they had to find creative solutions for ventilation. Of course, Vietnam was poor, no air conditioning at the time. So when you look at how, very simply with bricks, you had these things where the light comes through, where the wind comes through, and then people put plants everywhere. So they become like a garden, a very organic garden growing in the middle of the city.
And it also serves as a social space too, for people to talk to each other.
Yes, exactly. So I found that when I think heritage, of course, that's not your traditional heritage. That I don't think anyone will put a Hutapte in a UNESCO heritage list. And yet I feel that the body of architecture is part of Hanoi.
As a former World Bank economist, he participated in campaigns to preserve Hanoi Railway Station, the Bạch Mai radio transmitter, revolutionary murals, and traditional neighborhoods. He proposed financial mechanisms such as tax incentives, preservation funds, and investment tools to encourage private sector participation in heritage work. Outside of his work in policy, he photographs Hanoi, wandering through streets, observing details that make up the city's charm. For him, photography is not just a hobby, it is a way to say, "I love you," a way to archive memories of a city now deeply rooted in his heart.
You know, throughout a lot of the subjects that you take photograph for in this book, you know, when you stroll through the street taking photographs of, you know, elements of the living quarters, you know, the hanging laundry, the plants, the stairs, do you feel like a foreigner, you know, or trying to document a changing city, or more so someone from Hanoi, like, you know, trying to appeal to Hanoi and trying to be part of it like its natural citizens?
I'm not a photographer. I think I'm more pleased with my writing than with my photography, I would say. I just did it because it was a way to capture. More like when you take pictures of family, of someone you love, of a kid. It's like you want to capture the moment, you don't want to miss it. So it's more with love than with a spirit of documentation of a foreign country.
Yeah, and if you have one photograph in your book that you can point to right now that best represent, you know, your version of Hanoi, the Hanoi that you want to keep.
I was interacting quite a lot with the urban sketchers of Hanoi, who are doing a wonderful job. And so I thought, oh, maybe I will pick up like 20 or so things I really like about Hanoi and ask them. And so there is a very talented sketcher, a very talented artist who did the drawings, and Dang Viet Loc. And for instance, this is one I really like.
Yeah.
This is my house.
Wow.
This is the house I lived in on Trang Huân Dao Street. This is a 1932 house. Beautiful house in the center of Hanoi, Trang Huân Dao Street, gorgeous street. Just to give a sense, they had 14 trees. So I had in the center of the city a garden with 14 trees, which is complete luxury. And I lived there for 8 years, and those were very happy years.
Yeah. And so, You have written that, in your books, that Hanoi is perfect in its imperfections.
Well, I think everybody will agree that it's noisy, it's messy, it's congested. The weather can be miserable at
Yes,
times.
sometimes.
Hot and muggy or
humid.
But there are other aspects of the messiness that are part of the character. And to me, again, in the same way as I pointed to Hutaptes as something very specific to Hanoi, I would say the sidewalk life of Hanoi, which is messy,
Yes.
is part of its character. So partly the result of a city where space is very constrained, and so you do a lot of things outside. But people eat outside, they feed their children outside, they get their haircut on the sidewalk, they do business. Of course, they park the motorbikes, which is less nice. I think the way Hanoi is going about it, really having like time zones, like, okay, after 6 p.m. you can take your little tables out and everybody can get together with friends. During the day, you cannot do that because it would be too messy. This way of working with time zones with the sidewalks is one way of managing that messiness to make it livable rather than messy.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I personally love Hanoi so much is you can always design your mood in accordance with where you want to go. Hanoi is a kind of a special city that, if you want to choose a more fast-paced, kind of more upbeat, chaotic life, you can choose that. But there's always a left turn in Hanoi where you can find like pockets of quietness, of serenity.
Completely. Small lakes, pagoda courtyards. These options exist.
And there's always like one pockets like that in every busy streets where you can just like sit and just take a breather and then you can move on with your life. And is that part of Hanoi that is the part that you want to preserve?
I think if I had to say the things to preserve, some of them are related to architecture. Some of them are related to greenery and the lakes. I think that's also a very important part of the personality of Hanoi.
Right.
Not many cities have these lakes. We're always around. You have these perimeters that are walkable. But the third element I would say is the sidewalk life.
Yeah.
I think preserving that will be keeping that uniqueness of Hanoi.
And vice versa, to your point about making the city more livable, if you had to change one thing about Hanoi, what would it be?
Well, I think it's happening in the sense that public transportation, gradually you need to reduce the pressure of cars, especially as people went from bicycles to motorbikes to cars. There is only so much surface you have, and widening the surface is not very much of an option. So in a way, you have to go the transition that big European cities have done, where gradually you have very good public transportation, you have metro. The high density of Hanoi is very well suited to metro. And so that becomes more convenient. In many European cities, you get much faster if you go through metro than if you try to go by car. And gradually you are seeing it in the European cities. Cars are gradually disappearing from the cities, which become much more for bicycles and pedestrians. That's the big transition, I would say. I think another important element is to keep the heights. There was a time when some very high-rise buildings were authorized in the core of Hanoi. I think this repurposing of buildings is extremely important. One can see heritage preservation as an almost religious face to each brick and each column, or one can see it as a live building. And when you look at many of, say, the cathedrals in Europe, you start looking and you have centuries of piling up of different things. Today we see it as something that is consistent and homogeneous and harmonious. But when you peel, it's layers and layers. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
And to the point of repurposing a lot of the older buildings to create new meanings and new uses for them, I had the opportunity to go to Martin's apartment, which is a renovated space of an old living quarters in Hanoi, to you really have a look at how Hanoi would look like if we repurpose a lot of the older historical buildings that is already in existence. So please take it away.
Today, Talk Vietnam visits the apartment he carefully renovated, a place where he has written his meaningful books dedicated to Hanoi.
I didn't imagine to be hit by that beautiful terrace and very sunny terrace over there.
Yeah, it's very bright apartment. We're in a high floor.
Right.
This is the space between two hutapteos. It has all this line of trees. And then it has a lot of light because I basically open all that side.
Yeah,
And
which is very untypical of a normal collective housing unit.
Yeah, it was much darker. And then instead of having like tiger cage going out,
Wow.
I came in.
Should we walk towards
Sure.
it? Yeah.
I came in so as to have a green area.
Yes.
So you see it's an unusually large garden space for a hutaptea. And because it has the trees in front, you basically get the feeling of being in a garden, even if you are in the center of Hanoi.
So can you tell me about the size of this apartment? How big is it?
And the entire building got this addition. So it went from 55 square meters to 100 square meters.
So it's like a kind of like a renovation, that addition to the older building.
To the older building, each of them had this kind of additions. I have only been using the apartment. Also, I retired from the World Bank. So now instead of coming 2-3 days, I come 2-3 months.
Right.
And it's much more pleasant.
Wow.
But I have been using this apartment for 4 years, I would say.
Can you tell us anything special about this study room over here?
So what can I say about this study room? Of course, I open entire walls to have this garden. So it's a very nice thing. You can work with the garden in front.
Yes.
But I try to keep, as you see, there are the original windows.
Martin Rama keeps old objects and original details, like this vintage door, to preserve the authentic charm of an old Hanoi home. During renovation, he balanced the rustic character of collective housing and a bright, modern living space. To him, this is also how Hanoi can maintain its unique identity while gracefully stepping in contemporary life.
So how do you see that balance between, protecting architectural integrity of a city that is so old, that has such historical values, but also leaving space for growth and development?
And to me, one of the main problems of countries that grow very rapidly, like Vietnam is growing, is that in that rush, you can lose a lot of things. Hanoi has a very important asset. It's a much nicer city in terms of personality than much of what you find in Southeast Asia. And so protecting during this transition what makes the character of Hanoi, which is architecture, is the trees, is the sidewalks, is a lot of things that make Hanoi be Hanoi.
By choosing to live in a collective housing apartment, Martin Rama chooses to live alongside Hanoi's history, architecture, and its distinctive community.
A lot of the time when we talk about, preserving Hanoi's character and growth, it always seems like to be a conversation that is adversary to each other. But I think in you, on the other hand, feels like it's something that it can enhance each other. And so can you elaborate more on that part?
Sure. So let me give you here an economist response. As you said earlier in the conversation, there are spillovers from doing good things. And good entrepreneurs in advanced economies, in China too, have been very good at internalizing these spillovers. So for instance, buying beyond, when you look at two of the biggest heritage preservation efforts in the US, Soho district in New York and the Art Deco district in Miami, those were private entrepreneurs. It was a private entrepreneur who had the vision that this, if all is renovated, it will be worth a fortune. So purchased not just one or two buildings, but purchased entire blocks.
Yes.
And renovated the entire blocks. And of course made very good money out of it. So how to reconcile the business orientation, making it profitable, good for everybody, with the common good is, I think, where the economic thinking has to come in. This cannot be done just on government budgets. Vietnam is still a country that is developing. Budgets are needed for education, for health, for infrastructure. But where you have good entrepreneurs, you can do it with private sector, you can do it with artists who are often the ones who see the value of the potential of some of these places.
So looking internationally, what other city that you've seen is a prime example of being able to merge, heritage and development?
I think the Japanese culture is very strong culture. And so this sense of refining, minimalist refinement you find in many places. I think many European cities have managed to do that. In Vietnam, you take Hoi An, and Hoi An is a beautiful example of preservation. But you cannot expect a city of millions of people to be a museum city. That would be a mistake. So it has to be a city with life, with dynamism, with creativity.
I'm sure you've lived in many countries and many cities that certainly has its own charm and has certainly, leave a really positive and big impression on you. But what is it about Hanoi in particular that really sets itself apart, that really, where you consider it your home?
So it's true. I have lived in multiple cities. I have lived in India, in Europe, in the US, and from South America. And there are cities I love and I consider home. Of course, my own city, Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, Washington, D.C., where I worked for the World Bank many years, where my children grew up. Paris, my wife is French, and Paris is home. And Hanoi, I would say at this point I have like 4 homes. And I'm not in a position of saying, oh, I choose one and forget about the rest. I love them all.
Yes.
Each of them has different characteristics. But in a way, I would say Washington, Paris, and Montevideo are part of the Western world. I find Asia fascinating. To me, Hanoi is really the perfect mix of Western influences, but being a very Asian city. So to me, home in Asia is Hanoi.
Yeah. How long do you spend your time in Hanoi every year?
Overall, I spend 2 to 3 months a year. Since I retired from the World Bank, I retired 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I keep giving talks and lectures and universities, and so to me it's a very active life. And as long as my knees will allow me to climb my 4 floors to my Hutapte, that will remain my home.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot still for you to explore and discover and adventure in Vietnam, and more specifically Hanoi, with a lot of things to look forward to. And so Hanoi, through Martin Rama's eyes, is more than a city. It's a living organism of memories, contradictions, and hope. His journey reminds us that development is not just about buildings and numbers. It's about people, places, and the stories that bind them. Well, thank you so much once again, Martin, for helping us to see Hanoi in a different light, in not just, the numbers and development, but also with heart and with a lot of care. And to the audience at home, I hope that this has been a really inspiring stories for you and really inspire you to really see the capital city, our loving capital city, Hanoi, in a different light. And that is all for today's Talk Vietnam. And until next time, goodbye and keep discovering the stories around you.